My name is Jonathan Cullen. I'm a lecturer in the engineering department at Cambridge University and also a fellow of Fitzwilliam College. CirPlas is a research project across a number of academics at Cambridge. CirPlas stands for the Cambridge Creative Circular Plastics Centre, and essentially it was about an 18-month research program with lots of different researchers looking at different ideas to help solve the problems around plastic waste and plastic recycling, to move this whole plastic area to be more sustainable. And circularity is important. What circularity means is us moving from what we would call a linear supply chain, where we take materials out of the ground, oil, convert it, make it into plastics, and then dispose of it in landfills, and changing that to a system where the material kind of moves in circular loops. So the material goes round and round by recycling or reusing products at the end of their life. So we're not having to extract more materials out of the ground, and we're not having to put materials back into the ground. Instead, we keep those materials in a continuous loop. And circular economy is one strategy alongside many others that I would say fits into this whole space of resource efficiency. The P-word report that we've just put up online, it was funded out of the CirPlas project, and our initial aim was to map where plastics were coming from. So where were they made overseas or in the UK, how we use them in society, and how we're disposing of them for the UK. So that process is essentially a data collection process of taking in lots of data around all sorts of different plastic materials and products and trying to understand what happens to them. And the report is aimed, really for the general public. It goes into the science behind how plastics flow through our society, but it's written in a way, hopefully, that all can understand what's going on. And I guess the three things that I wanted to first bring out about that is in the title, which is that plastics are practical, pervasive, and problematic. And so just unpacking that a little bit, the practicalities of plastics. They are a uniquely practical group of materials. They're strong, they're lightweight, they're flexible, they're durable. We can shape them into almost any form that we want, and they're incredibly cheap to make. And those properties of plastic have led to an incredible growth in plastic demand over the last 75 years, quite a short time, since really the 1950s. And we've grown our demand for these plastics. They've become pervasive in society, and they are in almost everything we touch now, because they're cheap, because they're a very good product. But the problem is these myriad of different materials and products, each with their own unique properties and colors and ways and shapes, they make it very difficult to deal with them as a waste problem. Our modern production processes, the use of plastics and the disposal of plastics creates large challenges for us, environmental challenges, to do with both the release of carbon dioxide emissions, causing climate heating, and plastic waste. Plastics ending up in our waterways, in our oceans, and not being treated properly in their disposal. What's interesting, we found in the report, is despite a couple of decades of a lot of effort to push the public to recycle plastics, and what I mean by that is, we all dutifully separate our plastics out in our homes, in our companies, and put them into separate containers to be recycled. Despite all that effort, promotion, training, and all the goodwill of people to make that effort to recycle, our recycling record in the UK is still incredibly poor. we only recycle 11% of our plastic waste actually in this country. A further 20% is exported overseas to other countries for recycling. We don't know if it's actually often recycled in these other countries, and we have no real way of tracking that and ensuring that other countries are recycling our waste. And so that's a third is recycled. A third is incinerated in energy recovery. The problem with that creates emissions of CO2, and we're in setting targets to get to net zero emissions, so that's a problem. And the remaining third is still landfill. Despite all our efforts, landfill taxes, we're still landfilling a third. So, I mean, our conclusion is something is wrong. If we're putting so much effort into recycling and yet we are not getting those numbers up, something's wrong. And part of the problem is plastics are very cheap to produce, and so they're quite expensive to recycle. It makes it non-economic to do it in the UK. So we would have to subsidize that if we wanted that to happen. But a bigger issue, we think, and this is one of the conclusions of the report, is plastics is not one product. It's hundreds of different materials and thousands of different products that are mixed in all sorts of different ways. So a PET bottle, the plastic drinks bottle that you might buy a soft drink in, is quite easy for us to recycle, and we should recycle that. But the cling film that you put over your lunch food is very difficult to recycle. It's mixed plastics, and it's hard to get it back into a form to recycle. So maybe we need to rethink that recycling is the answer for everything. Maybe we need to go through each of these different types of materials and products and really work out what is the best solution that balances these problems of waste in our waterways, CO2 emissions, and our desire to make things circular in circular loops, to recycle. So each system needs to be analyzed separately. And I think that's what we're advocating as good practice, is not having one solution for all plastics, but having different solutions for different types of plastics. First takeaway is the environmental impacts of plastics. And what we found is that the two most important environmental impacts are the greenhouse gas emissions, the carbon emissions that are made during production, use, and disposal of plastics. And they, of course, lead to climate heating. So they're an important issue to address. The second is plastics ending up in waterways and in oceans. That problem isn't so much of a problem in the UK, where we do have a good plastics collection system, although some leakage happens and microplastics are ending up in our waterways. But it's a particular problem when we export our plastics overseas to other countries that don't have good waste disposal systems. And therefore, those plastics we're exporting, we don't know if they're being recycled properly, and we suspect some of those are ending up in rivers and then into oceans and causing the ocean and the plastic in the ocean that we see. I think the second takeaway would be that we need to think about recycling in the UK, increasing our capacity to recycle products in the UK. Remember, we only recycle 11% of our plastic waste here. So how can we increase that capacity? How can we make recycling profitable? And which materials and products should we be recycling, and which are just too difficult to make work? They cost too much to recycle, or they use too much energy. I think exporting our waste overseas is not a good option, and we need to be taking care of our own waste and recycling here in the UK. The third takeaway point is that we need to take urgent action to reduce these impacts of plastics by reducing how much plastic we're using. And here we're not talking about plastic straws and stirrers and carrier bags. Let's clean those things up, but they're a very small fraction of our plastics. Here we're talking about the plastics that are used in construction to wrap all your building materials, the plastics that are used in packaging when you get, you know, parcels delivered to you, the plastics that's around your food at the supermarket. How can we really reduce the amount of plastic that we, as people, responsible for in our purchases? And how can we use better plastics that reduce the impact of that? So reducing demand and reducing the impact of those plastics. And I think one important area there is the reuse of plastics. So just like we're trying not to use single-use cups, we're trying to use reusable plastic cups. The same should be true of our packaging. How can we have reusable packaging solutions where the box is used several times to be shipped back and forth between us and the supplier, for instance? So that would be my 3 takeaways. So we've just started a project called See-Through. Its title is Carbon Clarity in the Global Petrochemical Supply Chain. So petrochemical is the supply chain that makes our plastics. It also makes our fertilizers, fibers for your clothes, and solvents, so chemicals. And that supply chain, we've just received funding for a 3-year international research program involving universities in the States and here, to look at, can we shed some light on where the carbon is being produced in the supply chain and what opportunities we might have across the whole supply chain to reduce carbon emissions. So that could be devising a better way to make plastics, you know, with new technologies. It could be the way we use plastics, making sure we use them for longer and reuse them. It could be in, you know, chemical recycling options or different ways of treating plastics in the end of life. So that's a large project that just started for 3 years with about 10 investigators on it. So that's quite exciting.